The thunder clapped overhead as Beatrice Anderson clutched her swollen belly, the pain of another contraction forcing her to double over against the rough-hewn wall of the abandoned cabin. She had never felt more alone in her 22 years of life than she did now, stranded in the Colorado wilderness with a baby threatening to arrive 6 weeks early, and a storm raging outside that matched the turmoil in her heart. It was 1876, and the promise of a new life in Denver had turned into a nightmare. Her husband Thomas had left 3 days ago to fetch supplies and a doctor from the nearest town, promising to return before nightfall. When the first night passed without his return, Beatrice told herself he had been delayed by poor trails. When the second night came and went, worry gnawed at her. By the third day, as dark clouds gathered on the horizon and the first drops of rain began to fall, fear had settled deep in her bones. The cabin door flew open with a bang, startling Beatrice from her thoughts. Rain and wind swirled into the room as a tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. "Hello," the deep voice called out. "Anyone in here?" Beatrice shrank back against the wall, one hand protectively covering her belly. "Who's there?" she managed, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. The stranger stepped inside, pushing the door closed against the gale. Water dripped from his wide-brimmed hat and long coat as he turned toward her voice. His face was obscured in the dim light, but she could make out broad shoulders and the glint of a gun belt at his hip. "Madam, I mean no harm," he said, removing his hat. "I was passing through when the storm hit, saw smoke from your chimney." He paused, taking in her condition. "You're with child." Another contraction seized her and Beatrice gasped, clutching at her belly. "My husband went for a doctor," she explained through gritted teeth. 3 days ago, he hasn't returned." The stranger moved quickly then, crossing the small cabin in 2 strides. The creek's flooded. "No one's getting through from town for at least a day, maybe more." He knelt beside her, and in the faint light from the dying fire, she could see his face clearly for the first time, weathered but kind, with concerned blue eyes and a strong jaw darkened by stubble. "Name's Owen Garland, madam. Used to ride with the cattle drives, now I do odd jobs and some trapping in these parts." He touched her forehead gently. "You're burning up. How far along are you?" "Nearly 8 months," Beatrice whispered. "It's too early, the baby shouldn't come yet." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm Beatrice." "Beatrice Anderson." Owen nodded grimly. "Mrs. Anderson, I need to build up this fire and get you comfortable. That little one might not want to wait for the storm to pass." As he moved to tend the fire, Beatrice felt another contraction, stronger than the last. She cried out, and Owen was back at her side in an instant. "Stay with me, Mrs. Anderson," he whispered, his voice surprisingly gentle for such a rugged man. "Just stay with me, we'll get through this together." The fire leapt to life under Owen's care, and soon the cabin was filled with warmth and flickering light. He helped Beatrice to the small bed in the corner, arranging blankets and pillows to make her as comfortable as possible. "My husband," Beatrice said suddenly, gripping Owen's arm. "Something must have happened to him. Thomas wouldn't leave me like this." Owen's expression was carefully neutral. "The creek can be dangerous even when it's not flooding. Once the storm passes, I'll help you look for him." Beatrice knew what he wasn't saying, that after 3 days, hope was slim. She closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely now. The baby kicked inside her, a reminder that no matter what had happened to Thomas, she couldn't give up. "Tell me about yourself, Mrs. Anderson," Owen said, bringing her a cup of hot tea he'd brewed. "Talking might help with the pain." Beatrice took a sip, grateful for the warmth. "There's not much to tell. I grew up in St. Louis. My father owned a dry goods store. I married Thomas last year. He had dreams of striking it rich in the silver mines." She looked around the sparse cabin. "This was supposed to be temporary. And you?" "What were your dreams?" Owen asked, adding more wood to the fire. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about her dreams in a long time. "I wanted to be a teacher," she admitted. "I still have books in my trunk. I thought maybe once we were settled." Another contraction cut her words short. Owen moved to her side, taking her hand. "Breathe through it," he instructed. "Like this." He demonstrated slow, deep breaths, and Beatrice followed his lead. When the pain subsided, she looked at him curiously. "You seem to know about childbirth." A shadow crossed his face. "My sister. I helped deliver her son during a blizzard 2 years ago." He didn't elaborate further, but something in his tone told Beatrice there was more to the story, something painful. As the night wore on, the storm intensified. Rain hammered against the roof, and wind found every crack in the cabin's walls. Owen moved about the small space with purpose, heating water, tearing clean sheets into strips, and checking on Beatrice regularly. The contractions were coming closer together now. "I'm scared," she confessed as he wiped her brow with a cool cloth. "What if something's wrong? What if the baby comes and I can't?" "You can," Owen said firmly. "You're stronger than you know, Beatrice." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and somehow it comforted her. This stranger who had appeared like an angel in the storm was now her only hope. "Tell me about being a cowboy," she said, trying to distract herself from the growing pain. Owen smiled slightly. "It's not the romantic life people imagine. Long days, longer nights. Dust in summer, freezing cold in winter." He checked the water he was heating, "But there's something about watching the sun rise over open country that gets in your blood." "Why did you stop?" His hands stilled for a moment. "Lost someone, needed a change." He turned back to her. "Now I think this little one is getting impatient. Are you ready?" Beatrice nodded, though terror gripped her heart. The next hours passed in a blur of pain, and Owen's steady voice guiding her through it. He was calm and reassuring, even when she cried and screamed and gripped his hand so tightly she thought she might break his fingers. "I can see the head," he told her as dawn approached. "One more big push, Beatrice. You can do this." With a final, agonizing effort, Beatrice felt her child slip into the world. For one terrifying moment, there was silence. Then a tiny, indignant cry filled the cabin. "You have a daughter," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. He wrapped the tiny infant in a clean cloth and placed her in Beatrice's trembling arms. "She's perfect." Beatrice stared down at the red, wrinkled face of her daughter, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Owen busied himself cleaning up, giving Beatrice privacy to nurse her daughter for the first time. When he returned to check on them, his face was difficult to read. "The storm's letting up," he said, nodding toward the window where gray light was beginning to filter through. "I should go look for your husband once it's clear." Beatrice gazed down at her sleeping daughter. "Will you come back, even if—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Owen hesitated, then nodded. "I'll come back either way." He gathered his coat. "What will you name her?" Beatrice looked thoughtful. "Olivia," she decided. "It means peace." A rare smile softened Owen's features. "It suits her." He donned his hat. "Rest while you can. I'll be back before sundown." The hours after Owen left were the longest of Beatrice's life. She drifted in and out of sleep, always waking with a start at every sound, hoping it was him returning. Olivia slept peacefully, unaware of the precarious nature of their situation. As the shadows lengthened, Beatrice's anxiety grew. What if Owen didn't return? What if he found Thomas and they both decided to leave her here? What if something had happened to him too? Just as the last light was fading from the sky, the cabin door opened. Owen stood there, his expression grave, his clothes muddy. "Thomas?" Beatrice asked, though she already knew the answer from his face. Owen removed his hat, holding it respectfully. "I found him about 2 miles downstream. His horse too. Looks like they tried to cross the creek during the first storm." He hesitated. "I'm sorry, Beatrice, he didn't make it." Though she had been preparing herself for this news, the confirmation still hit her like a physical blow. Thomas was gone. She was alone with a newborn in the wilderness. A sob escaped her throat. Owen crossed the room and knelt beside her bed. "I buried him proper on the hill with the view of the mountains. Marked it so you can find it when you're strong enough." Beatrice clutched Olivia closer, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she managed, "for that and for everything." Owen nodded solemnly. "I'll stay on if you'll allow it." just until you're back on your feet. Then I can take you to Denver or back east if that's what you want." Through her grief, Beatrice felt a flicker of gratitude. "I would appreciate that." The days that followed established a routine. Owen hunted and chopped wood, repaired the leaky roof, and made the cabin more secure. Beatrice recovered her strength slowly, caring for Olivia and processing her grief. They rarely spoke of Thomas, but his absence hung in the air between them. One evening, as they sat by the fire after Olivia had been fed and put to sleep in her makeshift cradle, Beatrice asked the question that had been on her mind. "You said you lost someone. Is that why you understand grief so well?" Owen stared into the flames for a long moment. "My sister," he finally said. "The one whose baby I delivered, she didn't make it." His voice was rough with emotion. "Hemorrhage, nothing I could do. Her husband blamed me, said if I'd gone for the doctor instead of trying to help her myself, she might have lived." "That's not fair," Beatrice said softly. "You couldn't leave her alone. That's what I told myself, but I've carried that guilt for 2 years. He looked up at her. "That's why I couldn't just ride past when I saw your cabin, couldn't bear the thought of another woman facing childbirth alone." Beatrice reached across the space between them and took his hand. "You saved us, Owen, Olivia and me. Don't ever doubt that." Something shifted between them that night, a tentative understanding, a shared grief that somehow made room for other feelings to grow. As the days turned into weeks, Beatrice gained strength. She began to venture outside, first just to sit on the porch with Olivia, then for short walks with Owen by her side. He showed her where he had buried Thomas, and she stood there in silence, saying goodbye in her heart. "What will you do now?" Owen asked as they walked back to the cabin one afternoon. "Winter's coming, it gets harsh up here." Beatrice had been pondering this question herself. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have a little money Thomas left, but not enough to start over somewhere new. I have no family to return to in St. Louis." Owen was quiet for a moment. "I have a small cabin about a day's ride from here. It's nothing fancy, but it's sturdy. Good hunting nearby, creek that doesn't flood." He glanced at her. "You and Olivia would be welcome there, just until spring when traveling is easier." The offer hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Beatrice studied his face, no longer a stranger's, but a face she had come to trust and rely on. "People would talk," she said, not because she cared much about gossip, but because she needed to know his intentions. Owen's gaze was steady. "They might, unless we gave them nothing to talk about. Meaning I could court you proper, Beatrice Anderson, if you were amenable." The directness of his proposal surprised her, but she appreciated his honesty. "We barely know each other," she pointed out. Owen smiled slightly. "I know you're brave and strong. I know you love your daughter fiercely. I know you read poetry by candlelight when you think I'm asleep." His expression grew serious. "And I know I haven't felt this way about anyone in a long time." Beatrice felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I'm still in mourning," she said softly. "I understand that. I'm not asking for promises, just permission to hope." He reached out tentatively and touched her cheek. "You deserve happiness, Beatrice, so does Olivia." That night, Beatrice lay awake long after Owen had retired to his bedroll by the fire. Thomas had been kind and ambitious, but their marriage had been one of convenience more than passion. She had cared for him, mourned him sincerely, but she couldn't deny the flutter in her heart when Owen looked at her. Was it disloyal to feel this way so soon? Or was it simply life asserting itself in the face of death? The next morning, Beatrice made her decision. "We'll go with you," she told Owen as he prepared breakfast, "to your cabin for the winter, and—" She took a deep breath. "I would not be opposed to a courtship." The smile that lit Owen's face made her heart skip. "I promise to be patient," he said, "and respectful of your grief." They spent the next few days preparing for the journey. Owen fashioned a small wagon from parts he salvaged from Thomas's broken cart, creating a comfortable space for Beatrice and Olivia to ride in. Beatrice packed the few belongings she wanted to take: her books, Thomas's pocket watch to give to Olivia someday, and the quilt her mother had made for her wedding. The day of departure dawned clear and cold. Beatrice stood on the porch of the cabin, Olivia bundled against her chest and took one last look at the place that had witnessed both the greatest tragedy and the greatest joy of her life. "Ready?" Owen asked, leading the horse he had acquired from a trapper passing through. Beatrice nodded. "Ready?" The journey to Owen's cabin took most of the day. They traveled through valleys and forests, crossing streams and climbing gentle slopes. Olivia slept peacefully for most of the trip, lulled by the steady motion of the wagon. As the sun began to set, they crested a hill, and Owen pointed ahead. "There it is." Beatrice followed his gesture and saw a sturdy log cabin nestled among tall pines. Smoke rose from the chimney. Owen had arranged for a friend to prepare the place for their arrival, and a small corral stood empty beside a lean-to barn. "It's not much," Owen said, a note of uncertainty in his voice. But to Beatrice, after weeks in the drafty cabin where Thomas had left her, it looked like a palace. "It's perfect," she assured him. Owen's friend, a grizzled trapper named Jeremiah, welcomed them with hot stew and fresh bread. He cooed over Olivia and teased Owen about finally finding himself a family, which made both Beatrice and Owen blush. After Jeremiah departed, promising to check on them when he passed through again, Beatrice explored the cabin. It was simply furnished but clean and well built. A large main room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom, and a loft space accessible by ladder. Owen had clearly prepared for their arrival. There were dried herbs hanging from the rafters, preserves lined up on shelves, and a cradle in the corner that he must have made himself. "You did all this for us?" Beatrice asked, touching the smooth wood of the cradle. Owen looked embarrassed. "Wanted you and Olivia to be comfortable." That night, after settling Olivia in her new cradle, Beatrice sat with Owen by the fire. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on her, how quickly they had fallen into this arrangement that felt oddly right despite its unconventional beginning. "Tell me about your dreams now," she said, echoing the question he had asked her during the storm. "What does Owen Garland want from life?" He considered the question seriously. "For a long time, nothing but to keep moving. After my sister died, staying in one place felt like drowning." He poked at the fire. "Now I think I'd like roots, something to build, someone to build it with." His eyes met hers and Beatrice felt that flutter again. "And Olivia?" she asked. "Taking on another man's child is a big responsibility." Owen's expression softened. "She may not have my blood, but I was there when she took her first breath. That creates a bond." He hesitated. "If you'll allow it, I'd like to be a father to her in all the ways that matter." Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. "You're a good man, Owen Garland." "Not always," he admitted, "but I'm trying to be." The winter months passed in a peaceful rhythm. Owen taught Beatrice how to track animals and identify edible plants. She read to him in the evenings, discovering that, beneath his rugged exterior, was a man who appreciated poetry and history. Olivia grew stronger daily, her personality emerging stubborn like her mother, observant like the man who was becoming her father in all but name. True to his word, Owen courted Beatrice with patience and respect. He brought her wildflowers when he found them growing in sheltered spots, carved wooden toys for Olivia, and listened attentively when Beatrice spoke of her hopes to someday open a small school. The first time he kissed her was on a clear February night. They had been standing outside, watching the stars, when Beatrice shivered from the cold. Owen wrapped his coat around both of them, pulling her close. Their eyes met, and the question in his was clear. Beatrice answered by rising on her tiptoes and pressing her lips to his. It was a gentle kiss, tentative at first, then deepening as Owen's arms tightened around her. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. "I'm falling in love with you, Beatrice Anderson," Owen confessed, his voice rough with emotion. Beatrice touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I think I've already fallen, Owen Garland." As winter gave way to spring, the world around them awoke. Flowers bloomed in the meadow near the cabin, and birds returned to nest in the trees. Olivia began to crawl, exploring every corner of the cabin under their watchful eyes. One morning in early May, Owen suggested a picnic. He packed a basket with bread, cheese, and dried fruit, and they walked to a sunny spot by the creek. Olivia, now 8 months old, sat happily on a blanket, reaching for wildflowers. "I've been thinking," Owen said as they watched Olivia play. "About the future." Beatrice turned to him, noticing that he seemed unusually nervous. "What about it? There's a small town growing about 10 miles south of here. They're looking for a teacher for the children." He glanced at her. "I mentioned to the mayor that I knew someone qualified." Beatrice's heart leapt. "You did?" Owen nodded. "They're building a proper schoolhouse. It would be ready by fall." He took her hand. "And I've been saving to buy more land. Could build a bigger house closer to town." "Owen, what are you saying?" In answer, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "I'm saying I love you, Beatrice. You and Olivia both. I'm saying I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes as she looked at the man who had whispered "stay with me" on the worst night of her life and had never left her side since. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I'll have you." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and promise into the gesture. Olivia chose that moment to let out a delighted squeal, as if giving her approval. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church that was being built in town. Jeremiah stood as Owen's best man, and the mayor's wife held Olivia during the ceremony. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress that Owen had traveled 3 days to purchase from a proper store. "I pronounce you husband and wife," the traveling preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." As Owen's lips met hers, Beatrice marveled at how life could change in the span of a year. She had lost so much, but gained a love deeper and truer than she had ever imagined possible. That night, in their cabin now truly theirs, Owen held her close. "Happy?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. Beatrice nodded, snuggling deeper into his embrace. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good," he murmured, "because this is just the beginning." 3 years later, Beatrice stood on the porch of their new house, watching as Owen taught Olivia how to ride her pony in the yard. At 4 years old, she was fearless and bright, the spitting image of her mother with a spirit that matched her adoptive father's. Inside, their son Ethan slept peacefully in his cradle. Born just 6 months ago, he had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. The schoolhouse where Beatrice taught 3 days a week was thriving, with 15 students ranging from 5 to 16 years old. Owen's cattle business had grown, providing them with a comfortable living and allowing him to be home most nights with his family. "Mama, look," Olivia called, sitting proudly atop her pony as Owen led it around the yard. "I'm riding all by myself," Beatrice waved, her heart full. "I see you, sweetheart. You're doing wonderfully." Owen glanced up, catching her eye, and the love in his gaze still made her breath catch after all this time. He said something to Olivia, then helped her down from the pony and walked with her toward the house. "Someone wants to help make dinner," Owen said as they climbed the steps. Olivia nodded eagerly. "Can I stir the stew, Mama? Papa said I'm big enough now." "Of course you are," Beatrice agreed, taking her daughter's hand. "Let's go wash up first." As Olivia scampered inside, Owen pulled Beatrice into his arms. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" Beatrice smiled up at him. "Yes, but I never tire of hearing it." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Beatrice Garland, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "And I love you, Owen Garland," she replied. "Thank you for building that fire and whispering stay with me when I needed it most." Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Best words I ever spoke." Together, they walked into their home, where Olivia was already chattering about her riding adventure, and baby Ethan was beginning to stir. Outside, the Colorado sun shone brightly on the life they had built from the ashes of tragedy, a life full of love, hope, and the promise of many more adventures to come.